I started that quilt in January. The nights were long then, and the house had gone quiet in the way only winter makes it, the kind of quiet where even the creaks in the floorboards sound hesitant. I stitched while the tea cooled beside me, while the radio played hymns low enough to make me feel less alone. It wasn't meant to be a gift, not at first. It began as a way to remember. Each square I cut came from something we once lived. A shirt Tom wore to Sunday service, the apron Grace gave me the year she moved out, the curtain from Jeremy's old nursery. Tiny pieces of a life that once buzzed through this house like bees in spring, now folded into my lap like a secret only I still carried. I stitched memories into that quilt like prayers. The square from Tom's shirt, I sewed that one on a day my knees ached more than usual. I paused halfway through, pressed the fabric to my cheek. It smelled faintly of cedar and dust. I let myself cry, just a little, the way I do when no one's coming. The square from Grace's apron was faded, wine stains and flour marks, but still soft. I remember how she used to hum when she baked, the same tune over and over, even when she said she hated this place. She said the house was too small, that I was too small, but she still licked the spoon clean every time I made her favorite pecan pie. That's the thing with children. They remember how you made them feel, not what you gave up. When the quilt was nearly done, I wrapped it carefully in tissue paper. I tied it with the same ribbon I'd saved from one of their baby showers. I think it was Jeremy's, pale blue and crinkled now with age. I placed it in a brown box. Nothing fancy, just honest. I brought it to Jeremy's birthday dinner. Nancy had made a reservation at some loud place with string lights and waiters that never look you in the eye. They ordered cocktails I couldn't pronounce. I asked for hot water and lemon. It came lukewarm in a glass that smelled of gin. When it was time for gifts, mine sat last on the table. He opened it with the same half smile he used when he was little and knew he wouldn't like what was inside. "A quilt?" he said, like the word tasted dusty. Nancy laughed. Not cruel, but not kind either. "It's very homemade," she said, sipping her wine. I smiled. "Yes," I said, "it is." He thanked me, I suppose, and passed it along to the waiter like it was a jacket left behind. They moved on quickly, talked about a trip to Mexico. I nodded and stirred my lemon water. They didn't ask, not once. Not what the squares meant, not why I chose those colors, not why I stitched for hours until my fingers cramped. They never saw the stories in it, and I didn't offer. Sometimes love is like that. You give it, and they don't even know they're holding it, but you give it anyway, because that's what we do. That night when I got home, the house felt colder, not the kind you fix with a blanket, the kind that settles into your bones. I sat on the edge of the bed and ran my fingers over the calluses on my palm. A lifetime of lifting, scrubbing, stitching, serving. So they could laugh in warm restaurants and say things like, "It's very grandma." I don't hold it against them, not really. The world moved on faster than I did. They live in glass and chrome now, in phones and flights and places I'll never see. But I wonder sometimes, will he ever look at that quilt again? Will he pull it from some dusty box when he's older, when Nancy's gone, when the house is too quiet? Will he finally see it, not as a gift, but as a story he forgot to ask about? The day Lisa left for college, I stood in her room after the door closed. It was still warm with her, the blanket pulled back, the window cracked the way she always liked, and on her desk, a single bobby pin, bent at the middle like it had already lived a full life. I didn't cry, not then. I just picked it up and placed it in the drawer with the others. The silence after a daughter leaves is a strange kind of silence, not quite grief, not quite peace. It's like the house holds its breath. That evening I made soup. Tom didn't say much, just nodded and passed the salt. He never did know what to say in quiet moments. But after dinner, I found him folding laundry, her laundry, and placing it in a neat stack like she might walk in any second to claim it. I didn't stop him. We all grieve in our own quiet ways. That night, I opened the cedar chest at the foot of our bed. It creaked, not just from age, but from holding too much for too long. Inside, I found her first bib, yellow, with tiny blue ducks. I held it to my face and closed my eyes. That bib had stains I could never scrub out, carrot puree and strained peas, and maybe a little of me, too. And just like that, the idea for the quilt was born. Not for anyone, not yet, just for remembering. I didn't tell anyone, not Tom, not Grace when she called from across the country and asked only about the weather. I just began. The first square came from Tom's old work shirt, the one with the oil stain on the pocket and the tear on the sleeve. I remember patching that tear 3 times before he finally stopped wearing it. He always said it was the most comfortable thing he owned. Funny how comfort rarely looks good, but we hold on anyway. Next was a corner of my wedding veil. I hesitated on that one. It was delicate, already yellowing, but it had survived moths and floods and years of being forgotten at the back of the closet. Maybe it deserved a second life. I stitched slowly, not just because my fingers ached, which they did, but because I wanted to feel each memory again, to sit with them, to not rush through like the rest of the world does. The quilt began to grow. With every square, the past softened, not erased, just gentled. There was a square from the curtain in Lisa's old room, pink with little stars. A piece from the apron I wore every Christmas. Even a swatch of the couch cushion cover that Tom spilled coffee on the morning his mother died. He didn't notice at the time, but I remember. I remember everything. Years passed. The quilt lived folded on the edge of the sofa, then under the bed, then in the closet behind the winter coats. Not forgotten, just waiting. Then came the news. Lisa called on a Wednesday, said she and Calvin were expecting. Her voice was half laughing, half scared. I sat on the kitchen stool, hands still wet from rinsing dishes. "A baby?" I said, smiling so hard my cheeks ached. And then, quietly to myself, "I'm not done sewing." The next day, I took the quilt out again, spread it across the bed, and ran my hand over the stitches. Some had come loose. Time does that. It pulls even the tightest seams. But it was still whole, still ready. I added new pieces now. A square from the blue scarf Lisa gave me last winter. A napkin from the diner where Tom proposed. Still had the faintest scent of old syrup. And one more from the hospital gown I wore the day Lisa was born. Yes, I kept it. Not the whole thing, just a scrap. Enough to remember the trembling, the miracle, the pain, and the moment I first became someone's mother. I stitched until my hands cramped, took breaks for tea and soft music. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I smiled. It wasn't a baby quilt, not really. It was a map, a story, a soft echo of everything that came before that child even had a name. When Lisa visited in her 3rd trimester, she found it on the guest bed. She touched it lightly. "You made this?" I nodded. "For the baby?" I looked at her, then at the quilt, and said, "For all of us." He used to burst through the screen door with dirt on his knees and tears in his eyes, shouting, "Nana!" like I was the only safe place in the whole world. I can still hear the slap of his little sneakers against the tile floor, feel the way his arms wrapped around my waist, tight, desperate, trusting. I'd lower myself slowly, knees creaking louder than I cared to admit, and I'd press a kiss to his forehead like that alone could chase the hurt away. It usually did. There was power in those days, the kind that doesn't ask for thanks, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing my hands still had purpose. I could hold, mend, feed, carry. I could be what he needed without even asking. He'd sit at the kitchen table swinging his legs, watching me stir soup with those wide, curious eyes. Tomato basil, always. Said it tasted like summer, even in December. I remember the way he once asked if the birds outside ever got cold. I told him yes, but that they huddled close and sang anyway. He nodded, then looked at me like I had all the answers in the world. For a time, maybe I did, but life doesn't stay small, not for long. First came the video games, then the phone, always glowing, always needing his attention, and then the car. I watched him pull out of the driveway one evening, windows down, music loud. He didn't wave. I don't think he saw me on the porch. After that, it was holidays. Only holidays, and even those felt more like appointments than reunions. He'd sit across from me, taller now, broader, with eyes that scanned his phone more than my face. "Still making that soup, Nana?" he asked once, like it was a trivia question. "Yes," I said, "every week." But I didn't mention that I made too much and froze the rest, that I still set 2 bowls, just in case, that I still listened for the sound of sneakers at the door. The truth is, the house grew quiet faster than I expected. Not just empty, quiet. There's a difference, the kind of quiet where the only sound is the ticking clock in the hallway, and even that seems to hesitate before each tick. The kind of quiet where you notice the hum of the refrigerator, the wind brushing past the windows, and the way your own breath echoes in the room. I took up crocheting again, not for anyone in particular, just to feel yarn between my fingers, to make something soft in a world that felt colder than before. Sometimes I think about the way he used to call for me from the back porch, voice cracking, trusting, and I'd wonder, was it the world that changed or just the way it looked at me? I still keep the soup pot clean, still buy fresh basil even when it's overpriced, still keep bandages in the drawer, though the box hasn't been opened in years. He called last month, out of nowhere, said he was moving, said he found an apartment near the water, said he was excited. I told him I was proud, and I am. But after we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and looked at my hands, veined, worn, a little slower now, and I thought, these hands once held his whole world. Now they stir soup for ghosts. Weddings are strange things. They make people believe in beginnings, even when they're built on endings no one wants to talk about. Jeremy looked handsome, I'll give him that. Hair slicked back, shoulders straighter than I'd seen in years. He had Tom's tie on, the navy one with tiny stitched anchors. He didn't know it was Tom's, just said it looked vintage and borrowed it from the box I keep in the linen closet. Nancy was stunning, the kind of beauty that takes effort but pretends not to. Hair in a low bun, not a strand out of place. Dressed like it came from one of those catalogs Lisa used to leave on my coffee table by accident. She greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, air only, said, "So glad you could make it," like I was the florist, not the woman who birthed her groom. The ceremony was outdoors, white chairs on perfect green grass, soft music playing, not hymns, not quite classical either, something expensive, effortlessly forgettable. My seat was near the back. I checked the card 3 times to be sure. Right next to the swinging doors of the catering tent, where staff slipped in and out with trays of glasses and plates, whispers too busy to notice me. I told myself it didn't matter, that the important thing was being there, that my smile could stretch far enough to reach him from that far row. When Nancy walked down the aisle, everyone stood, phones raised, eyes wide. I watched Jeremy. He teared up, not like when he was 5 and scraped his knee, but in that tight, restrained way men do when they're trying not to show too much. I used to be the one who calmed him, held his chin in my hand and wiped his tears with my sleeve. Now she'd be the one to lean in and whisper, "It's okay." And I had no choice but to let that be. There were speeches. Her father told stories. Her sister cracked jokes that made the crowd roar. Jeremy thanked everyone who shaped me. He thanked his teachers, his best friend from college, even his childhood soccer coach. But not me, not a word. I clapped anyway, not because I wasn't hurt, but because when you've raised someone from diapers to tuxedos, you learn to clap through the ache. Later, they took pictures under the big oak tree. I watched from the side as they posed. Nancy's family in neat rows, her mother in pearls, hands gently clasped. I waited for someone to wave me in. No one did. So I folded my shawl tighter and wandered back to my seat. Picked at the roasted chicken on my plate. Listened to the forks and the laughter. There's a loneliness that creeps in loud rooms. Not the kind you feel when you're alone, but the kind you feel when you're surrounded by people who forgot you used to be the center of their world. I used to be the voice he called out for, the arms he ran into, the one who knew how he liked his toast, barely browned, just butter. Now I was a guest, a detail, a back row fixture they might vaguely remember in stories, but never quite see clearly again. Nancy came by near the end, touched my shoulder lightly, said, "Thank you for everything," like I'd delivered the flowers. I smiled, said, "Of course, because what else do you say when you've been quietly moved from the front of the stage to the wings and no one even noticed the shift?" I ironed my blouse that morning, even though the heat made the back of my neck damp. It was pale lavender with little pearl buttons down the front. Lisa once told me it made me look soft, in a good way. I paired it with my gray skirt and sensible shoes, the ones I could stand in for a few hours without wincing. The baby shower was at Nancy's sister's house, all white walls and silver faucets, the kind of place where no one lets the dog on the couch. I arrived 5 minutes early, quilt in hand, boxed and ribboned, my name written carefully on a small ivory card. Inside, the air smelled like lemon candles and new money. There were banners with gold letters, "Oh baby," and pink punch in glass jars with floating raspberries. Everything looked like it had been made for photographs. Nancy greeted me with a quick hug that barely touched, her smile tight, already scanning the room for someone else. "You made it," she said, like it surprised her. Then she turned before I could answer. I placed the box gently on the gift table. Next to machines that warmed bottles, a wipe dispenser shaped like a cloud, and tiny sneakers that would never touch real dirt. My box looked plain beside them. No glitter, no cartoon characters, just ribbon. Just meaning. I found a chair in the corner, by the window, a little out of the way, but close enough to watch. They played games, guessed the baby food, diaper trivia. I smiled when I was supposed to, laughed when others laughed, sipped the lukewarm tea someone handed me in a paper cup with gold foil stars. They called for gifts around noon. Nancy sat in the center of the room on a wide armchair, Jeremy perched behind her like furniture. They opened a diaper cake, a fancy sound machine, a set of monogrammed bibs. Each gift brought cheers and playful squeals. Nancy lit up at the self-rocking bassinet, clapped for the diaper backpack. Jeremy took photos, called it all awesome. Then someone handed her my box. I saw her hesitate, turn it over once in her hands like it might hum or light up. Then she opened it. The quilt unfolded gently, like it remembered being held. Squares of memory, faded but still warm. A piece of my wedding veil. The curtain from Lisa's nursery. Tom's old shirt, right in the center. Jeremy smiled. "The famous quilt," he chuckled. Nancy's lips pressed together. "It's sweet," she said, her voice bright, but her eyes already drifting elsewhere. There was no pause, no questions about the fabric, no moment of holding it close. Just a fold, a smile, and a move to the next gift, a baby monitor that links to your phone. I clapped softly, because that's what you do when your gift lands with a thud instead of a cheer. Someone handed out cake then, pink frosting with white roses. I took a slice, thanked the girl who gave it to me, and sat back in my corner. No one noticed when I left. I slipped out while they were laughing over a pacifier that glows in the dark. Walked down the front steps with my shawl tied around my shoulders, even though the sun was warm. I sat in my car a while before starting it, watched the other women through the windshield, Nancy's mother handing her a wrapped box, Jeremy laughing, the quilt folded neatly on the side table, untouched. I didn't cry. Tears would have felt too big for what this was. It wasn't cruelty, just distance. A quiet forgetting of where someone once belonged, and all the things she once held together with just a needle and a mother's hands. There's a kind of silence that comes after a quilt is finished, not just the absence of thread or the hum of a sewing machine, but something deeper, a hush, like a held breath. I sat at the edge of my bed, the quilt stretched out before me, waiting, not for more color or stitching, but for the final piece, the part no one would see. And maybe that was the point. I unfolded the envelope, yellowed at the corners, soft from years of being moved from drawer to drawer. It still bore Tom's handwriting, crooked, hurried, but unmistakably his. Life insurance policy, do not touch until needed. It had been tucked inside an old file folder, behind tax forms and appliance warranties we never used. When he passed, I left it there. Didn't feel like it was time yet. Didn't know who would need it or when. Until I started the quilt. Until I felt the rhythm of the needle and the steady return of memories. And I realized this child, this new life, might one day need something deeper than a blanket, something lasting, something that couldn't be bought from a registry or posted in a story. So I wrote the letter. To whomever this may find, if you're holding this, it means you've unstitched something, not meant to be seen quickly. It means you looked deeper. And I hope, above all else, it means you still believe that some things are worth discovering slowly. The words came easily once I started. I wrote about Tom, about how he used to sit by the window and read the paper, circling crossword clues he knew I'd like, how he hated arguing but would always, always come back to say sorry, How he held Lisa like porcelain the day she was born. How he made Jeremy laugh until milk came out of his nose. I wrote about the quiet ways we saved, the coins in the coffee tin, the odd jobs, the policy Tom got through the plant, just in case, the one they never asked about when he was gone. And I wrote that it was theirs now, not Jeremy's, not Nancy's, the baby's, a start for something good. I signed it, folded the draft and the note together, and slid them into a small fabric envelope I stitched myself, soft cotton lined with velvet. I sewed it into the quilt's inner edge, near the top right corner, a place easy to miss, but not impossible to find. Then I ran my fingers along the seam, pressing it flat, like a prayer being folded into skin. They'd never know, not unless they really looked, and I wasn't sure they ever would. At the shower, I watched Nancy smooth her hand across the quilt without care, never pausing long enough to notice the weight in that one corner. Jeremy smiled like he meant it, but didn't look twice. And I thought, maybe it's better this way. Maybe some gifts aren't meant to be understood all at once. When I got home that night, I stood in the doorway of my sewing room. The light was soft, golden from the lamp Tom wired himself. The air smelled of thread and warm dust. And I whispered, "It's done," to no one in particular. Then I closed the drawer where I used to keep the envelope, empty now, lighter, like something had finally settled. I still think about it sometimes, the hidden stitch, the quiet envelope, the baby who might one day pull at the fabric and find a corner that feels different. He might be older, 10, maybe 12, curious fingers, tugging, wondering. Or maybe Nancy will wash it one day and notice the weight. Maybe Jeremy will hold it in the dark when he can't sleep and feel that one patch press a little firmer against his chest. Maybe they'll never find it. Maybe it'll stay hidden forever. But I stitched it anyway, because love doesn't need to be noticed to be real. And sometimes the loudest legacies are sown in silence. I think Tom would have liked that. He was never one for grand gestures, just quiet, steady acts that held everything together, like beams behind a wall no one thinks. I didn't tell Lisa, didn't tell Grace, didn't even write it in my will. Some things aren't meant to be part of a plan. They're meant to be discovered. It started with an old box under my bed. Tucked between winter coats and forgotten photo albums was the quilt I'd worked on for years, not all at once, just here and there like a whisper added to time. Some days it was just a corner hemmed while soup simmered. Other times I'd sew through tears, each stitch steadying my hands when the rest of me trembled. It began the winter after Tom passed. The house had gone quiet, too quiet really, and I needed something to hold that wasn't just silence. So I gathered the pieces. Jeremy's old baby blanket with the faded ducks, the sleeve from Tom's Sunday shirt, the blue plaid one he always wore to church, even after it frayed at the cuffs. A patch from the dress I wore on our 30th anniversary, still carrying a hint of lavender. Each scrap held a story. The maroon flannel was from the Christmas when the power went out and we all huddled by the fireplace, roasting marshmallows over candles. I remember Linda giggling, her marshmallow catching fire, and Tom pretending to panic. That soft floral square in the corner, that was Grace's favorite apron, the one she wore when she baked peach cobbler, even though she always forgot the cinnamon. And in the center, right in the middle, I sewed the tiniest heart using Jeremy's first onesie, pale yellow with little stars. I stitched slowly, reverently, like prayer. The quilt grew with time, not just in size, but in soul. I didn't think of it as a gift, not at first. It was just mine, a way to keep breathing. But when Linda announced the baby shower, I thought maybe, just maybe, it was time. I spent the night before folding it carefully, tucking tissue between the layers like I was protecting something sacred, which I suppose I was. I wore my good blouse that day, the navy one with the pearl buttons. I even curled my hair a bit, though the iron left more smoke than waves. The living room was filled with shiny bags and designer boxes, satin ribbons, foil-embossed cards. Everything looked like it belonged in a magazine. I felt silly with my soft-wrapped bundle. Still, I placed it gently on the gift table. They opened it last. Linda peeled back the tissue with a polite smile, but I could already see it, the way her eyes dimmed. "Ugh," she said, "a quilt." Jeremy leaned over her shoulder. "Did you make this?" I nodded. "Every piece is part of our family." I thought it... That's sweet, Mom, Linda cut in, already folding it back up. We'll put it somewhere safe. Somewhere safe? As if memories could sit on a shelf. No one asked about the patches. No one noticed the center, the heart. They moved on to the next gift, a smart baby monitor that sings lullabies. Everyone applauded. I sat there, hands folded, pretending to adjust my bracelet so I wouldn't wring them raw. The quilt stayed on the sideboard the rest of the afternoon, not draped for display, just set aside. That night, back home, I made tea, sat by the window in my nightgown, watching the shadows crawl over the floor like they had every night since Tom left. I thought about taking the quilt back, driving over and saying, if it means nothing, I'll keep it. But I didn't, because maybe, years from now, when the noise fades and the batteries die in those smart devices, maybe they'll find it again, unfold it, and feel something they didn't have words for before. Maybe their child will ask, who sewed this? And someone, maybe even Linda, will pause, touch the faded blue plaid, and remember. It had been 3 months since the baby came. 3 months of silence, give or take a few photos forwarded in group texts, a foot in socks, a yawn, a laugh that wasn't mine. I didn't expect much. I'd learned by then how to shrink my hopes down small enough to fit inside a teacup. I was folding laundry when the phone rang. Jeremy's name blinked on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Mom? His voice wasn't sharp like it usually was. It was trembling, thin. I sat down. My hands still smelled of lavender fabric softener. We washed the quilt, he said. A pause. I could hear something in the background. Not the baby, just the sound of someone pacing, maybe. Heavy steps on a wooden floor. It tore, he added. The lining. There was something inside. My breath caught. I'd forgotten the letter was even in there. He didn't say anything for a moment, and then, so softly I barely caught it. Why didn't you tell me, Mom? My heart ached in a place I thought had gone numb. Because you weren't ready, I said. He made a sound, half laugh, half sob. I'm your son. I closed my eyes. Exactly. The letter was old, folded and faded at the edges, the ink softened with time. I wrote it after Tom died, on a rainy Tuesday when I'd finally opened the drawer with all the insurance paperwork. We never talked about the policy. Tom was like that, quiet, private, always thinking ahead in his own way. I didn't even know it existed until I found it. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough for a down payment, a car, or college tuition, whatever Jeremy and his family needed someday. I didn't want to make it a performance, didn't want to hand it over and watch it get spent on something shiny and short-lived. So I wrote him a letter, just a few lines. This money isn't just from your father. It's from all the dinners we didn't go out for, all the clothes we mended instead of replaced, from love that worked quietly behind the scenes. Don't use it fast. Let it help you build something strong. And I folded it small, tucked it into the quilt, and stitched it shut, right into the seam behind the heart. I thought maybe, someday, someone would find it. I just didn't know it would be because of a tear. On the phone, Jeremy didn't speak for a long while. Then he said, I feel like I've been walking around blind. I didn't say, you have. I didn't say, I tried to show you. I didn't say anything, really. Just, I know. He told me he reread the letter 3 times. He told me Linda cried. She said she didn't understand what it meant, the quilt, any of it, and now she feels like an idiot. She's not, I said. Even though I wanted to feel that flicker of satisfaction, I didn't. There was no joy in being right when the price had already been paid. Jeremy asked if I'd come by. Just for tea, he said. Nothing fancy. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked out the kitchen window. The garden had gone to seed, but there were still a few stubborn marigolds holding on. The kettle whistled behind me. All right, I said. Tea sounds nice. We didn't speak long after that. Just a few goodbyes, a few awkward silences trying to wrap themselves in warmth. When I hung up, I stood there holding the phone, not moving, just breathing in the space of something shifting. Not healing, no, not yet, but opening, like a window that hadn't been cracked in years, letting in air that smelled faintly of something better. All right, I said. Tea sounds nice. We didn't speak long after that. Just a few goodbyes, a few awkward silences trying to wrap themselves in warmth. When I hung up, I stood there holding the phone, not moving, just breathing in the space of something shifting. Not healing, no, not yet, but opening, like a window that hadn't been cracked in years, letting in air that smelled faintly of something better. All right, I said. Tea sounds nice. We didn't speak long after that. Just a few goodbyes, a few awkward silences trying to wrap themselves in warmth. When I hung up, I stood there holding the phone, not moving, just breathing, in the space of something shifting. Not healing, no, not yet, but opening. Like a window that hadn't been cracked in years, letting in air that smelled faintly of something better. It was a Tuesday, cloudy, the kind of day where the sky feels too low, like it might press you flat if you breathe too deeply. I wasn't expecting anyone. I just poured myself a cup of tea when the knock came. 2 short raps, hesitant. I opened the door and there he was, Jeremy. No car idling in the driveway, no phone in his hand, no Linda, no baby, just my son. He held 2 paper cups, lids steaming. Coffee, he said, lifting them slightly. I didn't know if you still drank it. I nodded, sometimes, when the day feels too quiet for tea. He stepped in. The house creaked under his weight in a way that made it feel alive again, like it remembered him. He looked around like he was seeing it for the first time, or maybe remembering something he'd forgotten. The same curtains, the same photo of Tom on the shelf, crooked in the frame, the same scent of lemon polish and old books. We sat at the kitchen table, the way we used to. I watched him take a sip. He grimaced. Too strong, he muttered. Your father liked it that way, I said. He smiled, barely. I remember. There was a long silence then. Not uncomfortable, just wide, like we were standing on opposite sides of a river neither of us knew how to cross. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the letter, folded, soft at the edges. I keep reading it, he said, over and over. He looked up. I didn't know, Mom. I nodded. You weren't supposed to. That surprised him. He leaned back in the chair, coffee forgotten. Why? He asked. It wasn't angry, just quiet, like he was asking more than that one word. I took a breath. Because love doesn't always come with an announcement. Sometimes it just waits, quietly, until someone's ready to see it. He blinked hard, looked down at his hands. They said you were cold, that you didn't try. I looked at him then, really looked. You mean Linda? He nodded. And maybe I believed it, he added, because it was easier. I looked out the window. The marigolds were gone now, only dry stalks remained. I gave you what I could, I said. The dinners, the stories, the stitched hems and saved pennies. I loved you in the quiet ways, the ways that don't photograph well. He didn't say anything, just stared at the steam rising from his cup. Do you remember the winter your father got laid off? I asked. You were 10. We told you it was a game. Who could eat the most creative meal? Crackers and mustard, cereal with hot water. You thought it was fun. He nodded slowly. I didn't know that's why. Exactly, I smiled gently. That was the point. He leaned forward then, elbows on the table. His voice cracked a little. I missed so much. I reached out, resting my hand over his. You were busy growing up, and I was busy keeping the world from falling apart while you did. We sat like that for a while. No speeches, no plans, just a mother and a son sitting with everything that had been left unsaid for too long. When he finally stood to leave, he paused by the door. I don't know how to fix any of it, he said. You don't have to, I replied. Just come back. He looked down at the floor, then up at me. I will. I watched him walk to the car. He turned once, just briefly, and gave a small wave, the kind he used to give me on his way to school, backpack bouncing behind him. And just like that, he was gone again. But not in the same way. Not this time. It was a Sunday morning. I was standing by the hydrangeas, pruning the dried blooms, when I heard the crunch of gravel. I turned, half expecting the postman, but it was Nancy. Her steps were slow, uncertain, like someone walking into a room they're not sure they're welcome in. She held a small paper bag in one hand and a sweater draped across her arm. Hi, Mrs. Thompson, she said, her voice soft. She always called me that. Never Grace, never Mom, not even when she married my son. But this time it didn't feel like distance. It felt like respect. I wiped my hands on my apron. Nancy, We stood there, not speaking, just letting the breeze pass between us. Then she held out the bag. Some lemon scones. I wasn't sure if you still liked them. I took it with a small nod. Thank you, I do. She smiled, just a little. Her eyes looked tired, not the kind of tired from lack of sleep, but the kind that comes when something finally settles into place. I saw the quilt, she said, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. Well, I really saw it, this time. I didn't speak. Sometimes silence is a better listener than words. She looked down. I didn't understand it before. I thought it was just old fabric, a nice gesture. Her voice broke slightly. But it was beautiful, and I'm sorry I didn't see it. I felt something shift in me, like a window opening just an inch. I nodded. Some apologies don't need answers. We walked to the porch. She sat on the second step, folding the sweater neatly in her lap. It meant a lot to Jeremy, the letter. He cried, you know. I did know. He hadn't told me directly, but I could hear it in his voice when he called. Something in him had cracked open. Nancy glanced at me, her eyes searching. Do you hate me? I let out a breath. No. Then, softer. But there were times I wished you tried harder to see me. She nodded. I did too, but I didn't know what I was looking for. That I believed. Nancy had always been caught up in appearances, the curated posts, the perfect dinner parties, the polished version of motherhood she wanted to show the world. And I didn't fit that picture. I was too plain, too quiet. I brought casseroles and worn baking dishes. I gave handmade things. I sat in corners and watched. But sometimes watching tells you everything. She looked out at the garden. Jeremy told me you used to grow tomatoes, said they were the best he ever had. I smiled, remembering his muddy shoes and the way he'd sneak cherry tomatoes straight off the vine. Maybe I'll plant again next spring, I said. She nodded. I'd like to help, if that's okay. I looked at her hands. No rings today, no bracelets, just clean, open palms resting in her lap. All right, I said, and I meant it. We sat in silence for a while. The wind rustled through the hedges. Somewhere, a bird sang and stopped. Nancy stood first. I should go. The baby's napping. She hesitated. Maybe we could bring her by next time? I didn't answer right away. Just traced the rim of the paper cup still warm in my hands. Let's start with tomatoes, I said gently. Her eyes glistened, and she smiled. That sounds perfect. It was a Tuesday again. Funny how the ordinary days hold the biggest moments. I was folding dish towels by the window, the sun coming through in strips across the floor, when my phone buzzed. Just a single message. No name in the preview, no words, just an image. I opened it, expecting a grocery update from the store, maybe a neighbor's dog spotted again. But instead, it was her, the baby, asleep in a nursery chair, cheeks soft with dream weight, one tiny hand curled near her mouth. And beneath her, the quilt, my quilt, folded neatly under her, holding her, the heart in the center peeking out just enough to be seen, the soft floral apron patch resting near her shoulder, the blue plaid of Tom's shirt cradling the curve of her back. I dropped into the nearest chair before my knees remembered how to work, and I wept. Not loud sobs, just the kind that slip out slow and steady, the way rain seeps through cracks in old window panes. There was no caption, no "look what we're using" or "she loves it," just the photo, as if that was all that needed to be said. And maybe it was. For so long, I'd wondered if anything I gave them ever truly landed, if it all just dissolved into the background noise of their busy, curated lives. But that photo, that was different. There was no audience, no filter, no tags or likes to collect. Just a quiet moment. Just her. And it. The thing I'd sewn with every thread of memory I had left. Not for show, not for thanks, but because love needs somewhere to live. I remember the day I first stitched that heart into the center. My hands were trembling from a long day, and my back ached from standing too long over the ironing board. But I wanted it there. Not hidden, not loud either. Just anchored. A reminder that even in the middle of all the worn fabric and faded colors, there was still something whole, something pulsing, alive. And now here she was, my granddaughter, sleeping in the middle of it all. in the middle of our stories. I wanted to call Jeremy, to say thank you, or ask how they were, or just hear his voice. But I didn't. I let the moment breathe. I didn't want to wrap it in expectation. Some things are better left untouched. Some answers speak for themselves. I saved the photo, of course. I even printed it, something I hadn't done in years. Slipped it into the wooden frame that used to hold Jeremy's second grade class picture. I placed it on the end table beside my chair, right where I could see it when I sip my evening tea. And every now and then I glance at it, not to admire it, but to remind myself that love, even the quiet kind, finds its way. I didn't need to be in the photo, didn't need a caption or a tag, because my hands were in every inch of that quilt. My time, my stories, my heart. And now, so was she. The mornings come quietly now, soft and slow, like they know not to startle me. I wake before the birds most days. The kettle hums, the tea steeps, and the house is still. I've grown to like it this way. There was a time I filled the silence with wishing for phone calls, for noise, for someone to knock on the door and remember I lived here. But I've let that go. I don't expect much now. Just warm socks, a steady chair, and the comfort of needle and thread. Yes, I still sew. Not for them, not for birthdays or holidays. I sew because my hands remember. They remember what it felt like to button Tom's shirts, to braid Grace's hair before school, to cradle Jeremy when he couldn't sleep unless I rocked him just so. They remember being useful. They remember being held. And I let them keep working. Some days I make small things, napkins from old blouses, patches for clothes no one wears anymore. Other days I start something larger, something that doesn't need to become anything but what it is, like peace, stitched slowly into fabric. No pattern, no plan, just thread moving through cloth. It's funny how hands can carry memory better than the mind sometimes. Mine know the rhythm of the needle, the tug of a perfect seam, the small hum I used to make without realizing. The same hum my mother made before me. I don't sew in the hopes that someone will find these pieces one day. I don't imagine them being passed down or displayed. This is for now, for me. I've come to understand that not all love needs an audience. Not all stories need to be told. Some of them just need to be felt, quietly, in the steady motion of a woman who refuses to stop making something out of nothing. There are days I miss them. Of course there are. I miss Jeremy's laugh before life hardened it. I miss the way Linda used to pretend to like my pies when we still danced around each other politely. I miss holding that baby before she knew how to look through me. But longing is a slow ache, and I've learned to live beside it. Sometimes they visit, not often, but sometimes. The baby is walking now. She has a dimple when she smiles, just like Tom did. They don't stay long. Life moves fast for them, as it always did. And I don't push. I just offer tea and a plate of something warm and let them take whatever kindness they're willing to hold. Because I don't need to prove anything anymore. Not my love, not my worth. The quilt still lives in the nursery. I know that because Jeremy told me last time. She won't sleep without it, he said, almost sheepish. She drags it around like a cape. I smiled, didn't say much. But when he wasn't looking, I allowed myself a quiet moment of pride. Not because they finally saw me, but because something I made stayed. And that's what I've learned. Love that stays doesn't always come in the shape you expect. Sometimes it's not a return call or a photo on the mantle. Sometimes it's just a quilt on a toddler's back, or a note folded in a drawer, or the hum of a sewing machine in an empty room. They may forget me in ways, but my stitches are still here, tucked in seams, pressed into cotton, woven through time. And so I keep going. I sit by the window, the light falls across my lap, and I begin again. Thread through needle, needle through cloth. Pull, breathe, knot, rest. It's not much, but it's mine, and in this quiet house, it's enough.